Good evening, everyone. So we are holding towards the end of Perek Mem Aleph on page 116. 4 lines from the bottom where it says V'hinei kol kavanasai. We are concluding over here the sugya, the topic of Avas Hashem. So last year we spoke about how Avas Hashem means that one has a desire to connect to Hashem, L'davka ba Yisbarach, to connect to Hashem. And this desire to connect to Hashem is, as Alter Rebbe says, is ad kidei mesiras nefesh, to the point of mesiras nefesh. We love Hashem so much. Our desire to connect to Him is so strong that we're even willing to give up our lives to stay connected to Hashem. And that is true, the Alter Rebbe says, about every mitzvah, because every time we do a mitzvah, every time we daven, every time that we learn Torah, in effect what's happening is mesiras nefesh. At this point we're giving up our own desires, our own will, and what we want, and our goals and our agenda becomes irrelevant, and right now we're being mismaser. We're giving ourselves over completely and entirely to Hashem. As Alter Rebbe says, what we learned in last year, that this is mamish like mamish the Gan Eden. Learning Torah and doing a mitzvah is mamish the Gan Eden, because just like in Gan Eden, a person is involved in and totally preoccupied with connecting to Hashem without any distraction. Really, every time that we learn Torah, we do mitzvahs, is the same thing. The difference, as the Alter Rebbe says, is only that in Gan Eden we experience the pleasure associated with this relationship, whereas over here in this world we don't. That waits until we go to Gan Eden. But in principle, it's the same idea. And every time before we do a mitzvah, before we study Torah, we're supposed to take time to think about this, that I'm doing this because of my Avas Hashem, because I love Hashem, and therefore I Avas Hashem to the point of Mesiras Nefesh. You're supposed to have this in mind, and with that you start davening, with that you start learning, with that you start doing the mitzvah. And as we learned last week, that if we're learning Torah for a while, so it's enough that you have this thought in the beginning of the session of learning Torah, and then at least once every hour to stop and once again and reorient yourself and think again about the idea of Avas Hashem and Mesiras Nefesh. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to add a chiddush. Let's do inside. V'hinei, 4 lines from the bottom of page 116. V'hinei kol kavanasi b'mesiras nafshi ela Hashem. The whole kavana that a person has in his Mesiras Nefesh, giving up his Nefesh to Hashem, submitting to Hashem, Aidei HaTorah v'Tfilah, through learning Torah and through davening. And again, the point is lahalois nitzutz elakus shebetoicha lemekoirei. The point being to elevate the spark of godliness within the neshama to its source. So when a person is doing this, when a person is focused on this Mesiras Nefesh and the desire to reconnect and reunite the neshama with Hashem through the Torah, through the davening, so the kavana should be rak kidei laseis nachas ruach lefanav yisbarach. It should be only in order to give nachas to Hashem and to give pleasure to Hashem. Kimashal simchas hamelach bevoi elav b'noi yichidoi, like the mashal of the simcha of a king when he's reunited with his only child. After the child has been in captivity with Beis Asurim and been in prison, as mentioned earlier. So this is a mashal that we learned earlier in Tanya and Perek Lamed Aleph. The idea that every time that when a Yid learns Torah, every time a Yid davens, every time a Yid does a mitzvah, so the simcha is like when you have a prince, the Ben Yachid of HaMelech, that's being reunited with the king after time that the child was in captivity and in prison. And Perek Lamed Aleph, he adds to the mashal. He mentions over there, if you look at the bottom of page Mem, Kimashal ben Melech, like the mashal of a son of a king, Shaya b'Shivya, that was in captivity. V'toichin b'veis asurim. Not only is he in captivity, Not only is he in prison, but also he's forced to do menial labor in prison. He's busy grinding in a millstone. Umenuvel ba'ashpa, and he's also completely covered in filth. V'yatza lachavshi el beis aviv hamelech, and he goes free to the house of his father, the king. And the same thing is, the neshama is the prince. The neshama is the ben hamelech, the child of Hashem. And the neshama comes down over here into this world. And it's in captivity in the guf, it's captivity in the body, it's in captivity by the nefesh habahamis, by the Yetzer Hara. And sometimes it's covered in filth also, spiritual filth obviously we're talking about over here. And imagine the simcha of when the son is finally released and is able to go to the king. And that's what happens every time that a Yid learns Torah and does mitzvahs, which as we've learned in Tanya numerous times, what happens then is that the neshama becomes completely subsumed in the oir of Hashem, in the light of Hashem. So this is an incredible simcha. Some Peirik Lamed Aleph, when we learned it over there, the context was the simcha of the son. There we were talking about the simcha that a Yid should have when doing a mitzvah, that if you understand the teichen, you understand really what's happening when you're doing a mitzvah, the incredible simcha that you have. But now, the Alter Rebbe is focusing on the other side of the coin. Yes, the son has an incredible simcha. How about the father? The son who was in prison comes back to the father. The son has an incredible simcha. But how about the father? And for those of you over here who might be fathers, let me ask you, whose simcha is greater, the son's simcha or the father's simcha?
Father.
It's definitely, the simcha is mutual, meaning they both have simcha, but there is no question that the father's simcha is greater. There's no question that the simcha of the father when the son comes out of prison and rejoins him is greater even than the simcha of the son, although the simcha of the son is also an incredible simcha. Experience.
Right.
So as much as the neshama rejoices when is able to do a mitzvah and able to daven, able to learn, and thereby able to reconnect to Hashem, Hashem's simcha is also incredible, maybe even greater. So when you're doing a mitzvah to connect to Hashem, don't think about your own nachas, your own simcha that you're getting when you connect to Hashem. Think about Hashem's simcha. Which this is an incredible thought. And it's really, this is something we've discussed on different occasions. The perspective that we have when we're doing a mitzvah. And how do we look at a mitzvah? We look at a mitzvah as a burden. Does Hashem really need my mitzvah? Who am I? What am I? What's my mitzvah worth anyways? How important is my mitzvah? But if we knew what a mitzvah is, forget about yourself. If we knew the incredible simcha that the mitzvah is causing Hashem, that the Ben Yachid, Hashem is Ben Yachid, Hashem's only child is being reunited with Him, that itself gives such an incredible chayis and such a gishmak in doing a mitzvah. Imagine, after Shir, now we're going to stand, we're going to daven Ma'ariv. How many of us think about how happy Hashem is that we're davening Ma'ariv? How many of us think about that? Right? At most, we think about how happy we are that we're connecting, that we have this chus, that we're able to connect to Hashem. But think of it the other way around. The Gemara says that if someone is, is ragil to come to shul every single day, and one day he doesn't come, so the Eibishter is wondering, where is he? Where is he? Not because he wants to punish that person, but because the Eibishter misses that person. The Eibishter misses the Tefillah B'tzibur. It's a game changer in thinking about mitzvahs. And when you think about that, it changes everything. Even imagine in terms of a physical father. Forget about a Ben Melech. Maybe it's hard to relate to that. If you know there's something that you can do for your father that brings him an incredible joy, wouldn't you run to do that? And this is the Eibishter. Imagine using a muscle we've used many times. Imagine a big tzaddik asks you to do something for him, and you know the amount of joy that it will cause him if you were to do that for him, you'd run to do it. Why? The simcha you would have, the joy and pleasure you have in bringing pleasure to the tzaddik. So this is true about every time we learn Torah, every time we do a mitzvah. We have to realize what we're accomplishing in terms of the simcha that Hashem has when we do a mitzvah.
So how you can think about Ben Yachid when they have million Jews that do the same thing? Not Ben Yachid, I have million.
So yesterday was the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov. There's a Farbrengen here, right? Yeah. And it is known that the Baal Shem Tov says that Hashem's ahava for every single yid is much greater than the ahava that parents who didn't have children for many years, and in their old age they had an only child born to them, the ahava that those parents have for that child, which we can only begin to imagine. Hashem's love for every single yid is infinitely greater than that. Because at the end of the day, over here in our world, every love that we have, because we're limited people, we're finite people, so therefore our love also is limited. And Hashem's love is believable. So when Hashem says, Ahavti eschem, Amar Hashem, when Hashem says that He loves us, we're talking about an ahava which is believable. So the question is the other way around. You want to know how is it that Hashem could love every single yid like a Ben Yachid? So I'm telling you, the reason why we bring a mashal of a Ben Yachid, because in this world, that's the biggest love that we can imagine. The biggest love we can imagine is that of parents to Ben Yachid. But the truth is, it's a very weak mashal. The truth is, Hashem's Ava is much more than that. So therefore, when a Yid learns Torah and does mitzvahs, the simcha is even greater than that. We can't even begin to imagine how much Hashem loves every single Yid. So when we're talking here in Tanya over here about this Avat Hashem, and we're doing mitzvahs because we love Hashem and because we want l'dafka, we want to connect to Hashem. So the Rebbe says, when you're thinking about connecting to Hashem because of your love to Hashem, the focus should be not on your own simcha that you're having from connecting to Hashem, but focus on the simcha that Hashem is having. Now, for those of you who recall, in the shir, not last year, but 2 shiurim ago, maybe even, and 3 shiurim ago, also we spoke about this a little. We said over there that there's a very, very high level of love. This is the love which tzaddikim have for Hashem, and that love is called kibradi ishtadal basar avoy v'imoy, which means that you love Hashem so much, like a child who works on behalf and labors on behalf of his father and mother. He loves his parents more than he loves himself. He's willing even to go on Mesiras Nefesh for the parents. And there we said that this Ava means that a person loves Hashem to the point that he himself becomes irrelevant. It's not about him anymore. It's not about his desire to connect to Hashem. It's not about his need to quench his thirst for Elokus, but rather it's purely, as we mentioned, right, that Hashem's will should be done. And what is Hashem's will? As we mentioned, Hashem's will is Yichud Kuchabrichu Shchinte, the connection of Kuchabrichu and Shchinte, the connection of the makar of all of Neshamas Yisrael, which is Shchinte together with Kuchabrichu, and therefore a great tzaddik who has this incredible Ava Rabbah, this incredible love for Hashem, his service of Hashem is in such a way that he is irrelevant. It's not about himself at all. In fact, it makes no difference to him whether he's the one who does the mitzvah or someone else does the mitzvah, because it's not about him at all. It's about that Hashem's kavana should be fulfilled and actualized over here in this world. The Alter Rebbe follows that up by saying that this is the kavana of great tzaddikim. Because great tzaddikim have zero ego, they're completely selfless, they're completely batal to Hashem. That's not an ava which is so much shaykh to every yid. It's a little shaykh to every yid. Alter Rebbe says we should still try to think in that way, but it's not an ava which is mamish fully. The words of Alter Rebbe, it's not be'emes la'amito of every single yid. Why? Because ultimately we're not on the level of tzaddikim. We have ego. We have this selfishness, and I'm talking about holy selfishness, the desire to connect to Hashem, and therefore, for the average person, the ava that can be be'emes la'amito is the desire to connect to Hashem. So that's more of my desire to connect to Hashem. So we have two types of ava. A completely selfless ava, nothing to do with me. It's not about my desire to connect to Hashem. That's the ava of the great tzaddikim. And then we have the ava which is shaykh to every person, which is the ava which is the desire l'dafka b'yisparach to connect to Hashem. Now here the Alter Rebbe is saying, but when you desire to connect to Hashem, it shouldn't be about your simcha. It should be about Hashem's simcha. Is this shaykh to every single person, or is this only for great tzaddikim? That sounds like for the great tzaddikim. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. And let's do this inside, top line of page Nuntes. V'hinei kavana zuhi amitis. This kavana is true. Be'emes la'mitay, not a little true. The ultimate truth, ligamri, completely. B'chol nefesh misrael, for every single yid. B'chol eisu, b'chol shah, at every time, at every moment. Mi'ava hativis, due to the natural love, shehi Yerusha lanu maviseinu, which is a Yerusha which we have from our fathers. Rak only. Shetzarach lekvaya itim. Let's stop here actually. The rak is. So it turns out we have over here, there are actually three different types of love for Hashem. And this love is a middle love, and Alter Rebbe says this is also shaykh to every single yid. So let's use an example of a father and a child who have a very loving relationship, a very close relationship. So one madriga, one level of love is that the child does something for the father, and there is no selfishness involved. It's not about me doing. I don't care about me. I don't care for, it's not about me being close to my parents. It's not about my parents getting nachas from me. It's nothing. All I care about is that my father should be happy, and he should get that which he wants. That is an analogy for the highest level of ava, which is the ava of great tzaddikim, complete selflessness. On the other end of the spectrum, the lowest level of ava is that the child does things for the parents, and the child wants to be by the parents. Why? Because the child enjoys being in the father's presence. The child enjoys being in the parent's presence. What does the child want? All the child wants is to be together with the father. That's somewhat of a selfish love. Then there's a middle ground. The middle ground is the child wants that the father should be happy from me.
Happy for me?
Happy because of me and from me. I want him to have nachas from me. On the highest level, I want my parent to have nachas. I want my parent to be happy. I don't care if it's from me or not. If it's from me, that's great. But it's not about me at all. All I want is that my parent should have nachas. On the lower level, it's not about my parent having nachas. It's about my desire to be near my parent. The middle level over here, which is what we're discussing about here, is the child wants that the parent should have happiness from him. You see the difference in the three levels? The highest level is the child wants the parent should have nachas. It doesn't make a difference who gives the nachas. If there are five children, so the person says, do I have to be the one to give my parent nachas? Let my sister give the parent nachas. What's it make a difference? As long as my parent, let's say, there's a beautiful gift to be brought to the parent. So the highest level, the one says, I care, I bring the gift, someone else brings the gift. My sister, my brother, what do I care? As long as my parent is happy, it's not about me at all. That's the highest level. The lowest level is that the child loves the parent, and what does that mean? That means the child loves the parent so much that he or she wants to be near the parent always. That's sort of a selfish love. I want to be near the parent. I need to quench my thirst and my desire. I need a relationship with my father. I need a relationship with my mother. So it's about me. That's the lowest level. The middle level is, it's a mix of both, you realize. I want my parent to be happy. I want my parent to have nachas. It's not about my desire to be close to my parent. I want my parent to be happy. But I want my parent to be happy from me. If my parent is happy from my brother, I'm not going to be as happy. I want my father to have nachas from me. Right? You see the three levels? Highest one is, I only care my parents should have nachas. Lowest one is not about my parents' nachas at all. It's about my need to have a relationship with my parent. And the middle one is, I need my parent to have nachas. And yes, I care about my parents' nachas and happiness, but I want it to come from me. And I think we all know that the middle one is something that we can all relate to also. The highest level is very difficult. To have a madriga, in any relationship, to have a madriga where it's not about me at all. All I care is about that the one I love, whatever, whether it's my parent, whether it's my spouse, whether it's my friend, that they should be happy. That's something which is very difficult. Because we're selfish beings. So that it should be completely not about me, that's the avodah of great tzaddikim. But this middle level, the Alter Rebbe says, is shaykh to everyone. Shaykh to everyone. That, yes, I'm doing a mitzvah because I want Hashem to be happy. And I want Hashem to be happy for me. In a very practical sense. We just spoke before about how we're going to go daven ma'ariv, and that's going to give Hashem an incredible simcha. The tzaddik would stand over here, look around the room, and say, wow, we have here a minyan of Yidden that are davening and making Hashem happy, and the tzaddik is in seventh heaven. Why? Because Hashem is getting happiness, and that's all the tzaddik cares about.
So why does the tzaddik have to daven?
Tzaddik davens because because that also gives Hashem nachas. But the point is that, no, it's not. No, the tzaddik. Everyone here is giving Hashem happiness. I will give Hashem happiness. Hashem is more happy, and more people davening is more happiness, and it's all about giving Hashem happiness. And it makes no difference who gives it to him. It's all about Hashem's happiness and Hashem's kavana and l'shem yichud kutzbrichu shchinte. The rest of us, when we're over here after davening, hopefully we'll have a little lift in our davening, right? Knowing that Hashem is happy. But are you happy because you're davening or because the other people in the room are davening?
Yeah.
You. One second, Hashem is getting happiness also from him davening? Oh.
We're not tzaddikim yet.
We're not tzaddikim yet. But this idea is something we can all relate. And that's what Alter Rebbe says. Don't be on the lowest level. And by the way, the lowest level is a very... to daven, and what the lowest level is, I'm davening because I want to connect to Hashem. I need to quench my thirst for a relationship with Hashem, and that's Alter Rebbe says, don't do that. That's too selfish. Move a level higher. Think about the happiness Hashem is getting. Now, to think about the happiness Hashem is getting in the abstract, and therefore your davening and someone else's davening is the same thing to you. That's for great tzaddikim. Although earlier in the page, Alter Rebbe says we should also try to incorporate that thought also about the idea of l'shem yichud kutzbrichu shchinte. But the notion that you could take pleasure in Hashem's pleasure in you, that's something that's not only for tzaddikim, that every single yid can have. Every yid can take pleasure in Hashem's pleasure and simcha in him, and that's a less it's still a little ego, because we're not the greatest tzaddik, but it's less egotistical. Ultimately, you're focused on Hashem's nachas. Hashem's nachas from you. And that, the Alter Rebbe says, every single yid could want be'emes. Every single yid could want.
It needs to make a shtadlut.
So, for example, let's say you have a father. Your father likes herring. He has this desire for herring. And your father calls you up one day and says, you know what? Guess what I had today? I had herring. It was mamash gishmak. How happy are you going to be? Yeah. A little happy. A little happy. I'm happy my father. I don't want to. It's not. Do I have a desire that my father should eat herring? It's his desire. In the Nimshal, that's Hashem has a desire for Yichud Kodesh Shchinte. That's his desire. But how about if you go bring the herring to your father? And your father gives you a smile and says, "Oh, thank you so much for that herring. I'm so happy." It's different, right? Why is it different? In both cases, your father has the herring. The difference is what? This was you giving the nachas. And that's something that you could really, really enjoy and bask in that pleasure that you gave your father. That's not the avodah of big tzaddikim. And that's really, Hashem has his pleasure from from everything, and everything. And to be able to take real pleasure and simcha in Hashem's pleasure, that's a tzaddik. But what we could do is we can take pleasure in Hashem's nachas from us. And that's what Alter Rebbe is ending over here. Alter Rebbe says, the final word I have to you about Avos Hashem, you love Hashem, and therefore you want to be close to Hashem. Great, go ahead. Learn, daven, do mitzvahs to be close to Hashem, but have in mind when you're doing it that I'm coming close to Hashem. Why? Because of the simcha. Because of the simcha that Hashem takes in that. And then the Alter Rebbe says, Rak, however, that a person needs to establish times Hashem, to contemplate the greatness of Hashem, lahasig, in order to be able to attain the chilu or the chimu sichliyim, intellectual love and fear of Hashem, the kuli hayvu ulai. And if a person works hard on it, perhaps v'chulu kenal, perhaps he'll be able to get it, as I mentioned earlier. Because until now in the Perek we're talking about drawing. We have mentioned several times the idea of drawing upon our natural love for Hashem and our natural fear of Hashem. Even a line earlier, ma'ava hativis, we talk about the natural love. But even greater than that is an intellectual love, and the reason for that we'll talk about the Mir Hashem later when we get to Perek Mem Daled. Mem Daled, yes, make a note. And with that we have concluded Perek Mem Aleph, and now we will move on to Perek Mem Beis. But first we need a recap and reset where we are before we move on to Perek Mem Beis. In Perek Lamed Hey, we started talking about the idea of Dira B'Tachtonim. The idea of what Hashem's ultimate desire was in the creating of this world. And the Alter Rebbe explains that Hashem's desire in creating this world was because Hashem wants a dwelling place B'Tachtonim, in the lowest place possible. And therefore, because of Hashem's desire for a Dir B'Tachtonim, that's why Maisa HaMitzvahs is so important. That's why the deed, action, is so important, because the very lowest thing is action, is deed. It's lower than Seichel, it's lower than Midas, and Hashem wants, in the Gashmistic world, the physical actions and the physical objects of the world, Hashem wants a Dira. He wants to be present there. In Perek Lamed Ches, we transitioned and we said, yes, the action is very important, the deed is very important, but that doesn't mean that Kavanah isn't important. Kavanah is very, very important. And Dr. Rebbe goes on for several prakim and he talks about the importance of Kavanah being Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And he explains that the Kavanah of every mitzvah and the Kavanah of Limud HaTorah is what gives it its neshama and gives it its spiritual identity and allows it to rise up, allows the act to rise up to the higher worlds. So the main thing remains the deed, the act, but the kavanah is the neshama of the act. And therefore an act is complete when it has a neshama also. In this past Perek, in Perek Mem Aleph, the Alter Rebbe suddenly started talking about Ava separate, Yira separately and Ava separately. In the Prakim before then, from Lamed Ches, Lamed Tes and Mem, the Alter Rebbe was talking about Yira and Ava jointly, calling them Kavanah or calling them Lishma. And in this Perek, the Alter Rebbe says, okay, let's dissect. What is Yiras Hashem? What is Avas Hashem? The first half of the Perek we spoke about Yiras Hashem and different levels in Yiras Hashem, if you recall. You know, there's a yira which is in the heart, there's a yira which is only in the mind, then there's a yira which is, like Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai said, Kemoira Basar V'dam, simply a yira from Hashem, like you don't do something inappropriate when someone's watching from you. We spoke about different levels of yira in descending order, and the Alter Rebbe explains that the nekuda in all of these levels of yira. The bottom line is that they're all about bittul to Hashem, and that's why, as mentioned, we don't talk about yiras ha'inish. We don't talk about that a person is afraid of being punished, because that's not bittul. That's, you're doing that for yourself. The nekuda of yira is bittul to Hashem. And then we moved on to the second parak of the second half of parak parak Mem Aleph. What is the idea of ava? The idea of ava, the at the center of Yira is bittul. At the center of Ava is the desire ledafka, the desire to connect to Hashem. In this ledafka, we spoke different levels in the ledafka also. You can have the desire ledafka, to connect all of Klal Yisrael with Hashem. That's the Ava of the greatest tzaddikim. And then there are lower levels of ledafka, the desire to connect to Hashem, or as we just learned now, an even higher level, which is the desire to connect to Hashem, to give Hashem simcha. But either way, what we have over here is what we now also know, we've identified and described Yira on its own. That Yira, although we talked about many different levels of Yira, all of these levels of Yira are the idea of bittul to Hashem, being Hashem's eved. We've identified and described what Ahava is, and Ahava is the desire to connect to Hashem at many different levels. And now that we've identified and described the point, the central idea of what Yira is, what Ava is, now for the next 9 prakim, from Perek Mem Beis through Perek Nun, from Perek 4, chapter 42 through chapter 50, the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss different levels of and avenues to loving Hashem and fearing Hashem. And there are going to be many different meditations we're going to learn over here. The bottom line is, Alter Rebbe, until now we were talking about the importance of Ava and Yira. Now we're going to talk about different ways to arrive at Yiras Hashem, different ways to arrive at Avos Hashem, different levels of Yiras Hashem, different levels of Avos Hashem. And again, this is going to take us, through the next nine chapters. Perek Mem Beis and half of Perek Mem Gimel, the first half of Perek Mem Gimel, is going to be about Yiras Hashem, and then the second half of Perek Mem Gimel, and then all the way through Perek Nun is going to be about Ahavas Hashem. So we're really going to be exercising our emotions in the coming weeks and months, and learning all about Ahavas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. Until now, Tanya was more practical, and now we're going to get into the Ahavas Hashem, Yiras Hashem element. And with that, we will start. Perek Mem Beis. V'hinei b'mashen is bar le'el, with what we explained earlier in Yirat Tata regarding the lower level of Yiras Hashem, because everything that we spoke about in Perek Mem Aleph about Yiras Hashem, even though we spoke several levels, all of those are called Yirat Tata. They're all included in the lower level of Yira. What is the higher level of Yira? That we're going to learn about in Yiras Hashem in Perek Mem Gimel. You hear Reuven? Perek Mem Gimel. There we'll talk about the higher level of Yiras Hashem. Everything in Perek Mem Aleph was the lower level of Yiras Hashem. So with everything that we learned, Yuvan will understand Heita very well. Mashakasav b'Gemara will understand that which it says in the Gemara. It's a Gemara Mesechtes Brachos, it's a surprising Gemara. Al pasuk ve'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha shoyel mi'imach. The pasuk says in Chumash Devarim, and Ekev Re'eh, somewhere around there, the pasuk says that Moshe turns to Yidden and tells them, and now Yidden, ma Hashem Elokecha shoyel mi'imach. What's Hashem asking of you already? Ki im yiras Hashem Elokecha. All he wants is that you should fear him. Now imagine if you're in the crowd when Moshe Rabbeinu says that. What are you going to respond to Moshe Rabbeinu? If you had some chutzpah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. That's all. That's all Hashem wants, that you should fear him. That's all. And the Gemara asks that. Atu yira milsa zutrasihi. Is yira azak kleinakait? Is yira something which is so small to the point that Moshe is trivializing it and saying that's all Hashem wants from you? So the Gemara answers in legabe Moshe milsa zutrasihi chulu. Yeah, for Moshe taka yiras Hashem wasn't a big deal. No, who's happy with this answer? Doesn't answer the question. Why not?
Because this is addressing to all.
Because Moshe wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to all the Yidden. Right. Right. Imagine a person gets up and he gives a speech and says, You know, what am I asking of you all? All I want is that everyone over here should give $10 million to tzedakah. Really? That's all? Oh, he's a billionaire, so for him it's not a big deal. But he's talking to everyone. Was Moshe clueless? He didn't know who he was talking to? But again, it's not only that, but the answer of the Gemara is a surprising answer, because the Gemara asks a good question. But the answer doesn't seem... So, yeah, for Moshe it was a small thing. And Moshe therefore didn't understand that not everyone is in the same madrega as him.
I think Moshe Rabbeinu knew the level of Am Yisrael that can get to this level.
But then that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara doesn't answer that. The Gemara says that for Moshe it's a small thing. If you're correct, the Gemara should have said that. Should have said, oh, Moshe understood the potential of Klal Yisrael. But that's not what the Gemara says. The Gemara says for Moshe it was a small thing. How does that answer the question? There were some great tzaddikim who had such a edel koyach hariyah, such a refined sense of vision that the didn't see anything bad in anyone else. But it's hard to say that the Moshe Rabbeinu, especially after everything he went through with the Yidden in the 40 years in the desert, that he was oblivious to life's challenges. That he was a Rei Yisrael, he was a leader of Klal Yisrael. And by the way, those great tzaddikim were oblivious to other people's flaws. They are amazing tzaddikim, but they're not leaders. You can't be a leader, and you can't be a mentor to someone if you have if you don't understand that person's reality. So what does the Gemara mean? Inside, weiter inside, the L'chayra any movement. The Alter Rebbe says L'chayra. This Gemara isn't understood. Hatirutz, in other words, the answer isn't understood. Why the Hashem Maksiv? Moshe didn't say, "What is Hashem asking of me?" He's saying, "What is Hashem asking of you?" So how does it help the fact that Moshe, the Lagabi Moshe, it was a Milsa Zutrisa. So the answer is going to be a long answer, which is only going to conclude on page 120, a few pages from now. I'm not going to get there today. But the kernel of the answer is that every single Yid has within him or herself a little Moshe Rabbeinu. And if we can get in touch with Moshe Rabbeinu, the Moshe Rabbeinu within us, then Yiras Hashem is not so difficult. So the Gemara's answer, Legabi Moshe, that Legabi Moshe, it's a small thing. It doesn't only mean Legabi Moshe. It means also Legabi the Moshe, which every single one of us has inside. But it's going to take us a while to get there, and let's do this inside. But the Indian is like this. Kol nefesh v'nefesh mebeis Yisrael, every single neshama of every yid, yeshma bebechinis Moshe Rabbeinu olav shalom, has within itself, every neshama has a little bit of Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is that? Kihu, because Moshe Rabbeinu is mishiva royim. Moshe is from the 7 shepherds. Hamamshichim chayis ve'elokus leklalus neshamas Yisrael. That bring down energy and godliness to every single neshama. There's a pasuk in Micha where it talks about the Shiva Royim. There are seven shepherds and Shmoina Nesichei Adam, 8 princes. For our conversation right now, is only important the 7 shepherds. We have the Klal Yisrael. We have 7 shepherds, and they are Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, and David. Those are also the Ushpizim. Come visit us. And they are called our Shiva Royim. Why are they the Shiva Royim? What does it mean that they are our shepherds? A shepherd is someone to shepherd the flock. You make sure that all the the animals in the flock, they eat. The shepherd makes sure they're fed. The Shiva Royim are mamshich. They give to every single neshama of every single yid. B'pnimius, that each one has a certain midah of kedusha. Avram is chesed, and Yitzchak is gevura, and Yaakov is teferes, etc. And each one of the Shiva Royim gives that to us in a pnimius. Kaviyachol feeds us that midah. So our ability to have chesed, which means chesed means with other people, and also avas Yisrael, avas HaTorah, and of course avas Hashem, that comes from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu feeds us that midah. The fact that we have the ability to have yira, that midah is fed to us by Yaakov, by Yitzchak. Shalachei nikrayim b'shem roim. That's why they're called roim. That's why they're called shepherds, because they are the ones who give us godliness. But each one gives us feeds us godliness to our neshama in a lakus to our neshama in a different form. Avram feeds our neshama with godliness in the form of chesed, and Yitzchak in the form of gvura, etc. Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom of the 7 shepherds. Shlachei nikrayim b'shem roim. That's why they're called shepherds. Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom hu klalos kula. Moshe Rabbeinu, he includes them all. V'nikra raya mehemlan. That's why of all of them, even though they're all 7 of them are shepherds, but the only one who's known by the name of a shepherd is Moshe. He's called the Raya Mehemna, the Raya Neman. The Zohar calls Moshe the faithful shepherd of Klal Yisrael. And why is that? Dahainu shemamshech b'chines hadas l'Klal Yisrael, because Moshe Rabbeinu gives Klal Yisrael, gives every neshama das, leidas Hashem. Now the word das is usually, as we know, is usually translated as knowledge. But in Chassidus and Kabbalah, das, more than anything, represents connection. As in Va'adam Yada es Chava, which the word Yada, in that context, the biblical Adam Nu Chava, das over there means connection. Whereas the pasuk says Vayeda Elikim, Vayedas, or Ki Yedaticha, or Ki Yedaitiv. The word das means connection sometimes. So Moshe Rabbeinu, what he gives Klal Yisrael is the capacity to connect. Avraham gives us the capacity to connect to Chesed. Yitzchak gives us the capacity to connect to Gevura. But the capacity to connect itself, that comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's why Moshe Rabbeinu is the main shepherd of all the 7 shepherds. Moshe is the main one because we connect to everything, even that which we get from Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov. We connect it through Moshe Rabbeinu, because the capacity of das comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is something which we've spoken about in the past, specifically in Perek Gimel and Tanya. The idea of das, we spoke about it at length, for those who recall. That it's possible for a person to have a lot of information, but not to connect it. There is no das. But not to connect it. You have a lot of information,
But you have no use of it.
but you have not internalized it and become one with it.
It's fine. It's not connection.
Famous story about, they say it about the Alter Rebbe. They also say that, I've heard it also about the Levi Berditchever, that when he came back from Mezrich, where he was learning Chassidus, so his father-in-law, who wasn't a Chassid, asked him, "No, what did you learn by the Maggid?" So he answered, "I learned a lot. Now I know that there's an Eibishter on this world." So the father-in-law started laughing. Says, "Really? That's what you went to your great Rebbe for and spent all that time there?" He called over the maid, a Jewish girl, and said to her, "Is there an Eibishter around the world?" She says, "Of course, yes." So the Rebbe answered, "She says that there's an Eibishter. I know that there's an Eibishter." There's a difference. You know, when you say there's a difference, you're implying that there's some similarity, but there's also a difference. Saying and knowing is two worlds. It's two worlds. You wonder, why is it that you have sometimes a person who's a Talmud Chacham and everything, and you find out he did something which was inappropriate? That's a lack of das. It's a lack of das. Das means to connect. Chachma and Bina is understanding. Das is connection. The Gemara says that Ganav Apumud de Machtarta Rachmana Kari, which means that when a robber, before he's about to commit his crime, he takes a moment and he lets out a small, quick prayer to Hashem, saying, "Please help me." What? Help? Ana Hashem Hashiana. Help me a little. He believes in Hashem, obviously, but he didn't connect it. He didn't internalize it. He didn't become one with it. If he was one with the idea that there's Hashem, and that this Hashem supports everyone and feeds everyone and gives everyone life, etc., etc., he wouldn't be stealing, obviously. So das means that whatever you know or whatever you learned, you become one with. There's there was a chassid who lived in the early 19th century. His name was Rabbi Dvoskin. He was better known as Rabbi Chachersker because he came from the city of Chachersk. He was a very great chassid, a holy person. But he was Nebuch, a very ill person. Literally, if any malady you could think of, he suffered from. So he was the head, the mashpia in the Lubavitch Yeshiva in Kherson, in Russia. Probably talking in the 30s, 1930s. I believe he was killed by the Nazis. And there's another chassid, his name was Mendel Futterfass, who he was close to him, although Mendel was much younger than him, much younger. And again, he was so ill that it came to the point that he couldn't even eat anything because everything he ate was impacting him. He was having different reactions to the point that he literally ate every day a little bread and milk. That's it. That's all he was allowed to eat. And he was so weak, he could barely hold himself up. And at a certain point in time, they decided they're going to send him away to Dacha, send him away to the country for 2 weeks. So maybe he'll become a little more strong. He came back, didn't help anything. Came back to yeshiva, and they daven Ma'ariv, and after Ma'ariv, so Reb Mendel walks over to him and says, "Reb Leizer, was macht Yid?" So he says, "Oi, halavai, as mein Ruchnius soll sein as wie mein Gashmius." I wish that my Ruchnius was as good as my Gashmius. I wish that my spiritual life was as good as my physical life. So Reb Mendel looked at him. He's crazy. He says, "What kind of Gashmiistic life do you have? You have nothing. You have a piece of bread and a half a cup of milk a day." And he says, "What do you mean?" He says, "That's all you want? Such a meager spiritual life?" So he says, "Reb Mendel, was verstehst du nicht? Reb Mendel, what don't you understand? I eat only very little every single day. I eat a little piece of bread, and I eat and I have some milk. But the little that I eat, it goes in me and it invigorates me. It gives me the little strength that I have. Halavai, that my ruchni should be the same way. That whatever I learn, whatever I daven, it should enter within me and actually invigorate me. It should become one with me. It should become, I should have das, in different words. And when you connect with something, when it comes one with you, it becomes your reality. It becomes part of your being. There's more of a comical story that's said about, there was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe whose name was Reb Shmuel Munkes. And even though he was a very holy Yid, I think I've said stories about him in the past over here before. He was a very holy Yid, a very tzaddik, but his style was that he played shtick. He did comedy. In other words, but Chassidim always had a very great respect for him and knew that everything that he's doing, there's depth there. There's depth. He's trying to teach lessons. So one time he's walking to the Alter Rebbe. And today we take a train, and if we're poor, we take a car. And in those days, if you're rich, you had a horse and wagon. Otherwise, you walked. You could walk for days. You could walk for weeks. You could walk for a month. There was a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek whose name is. His name was Reperetz Chaim. And every year, he would walk to Lubavitch once a year. I don't know, it was wherever it was, whether it was a week, whether it was 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but he walked. When he got older, he cut it down. He was too weak, he'd go once every other year. So they asked him, why don't you just take a horse and wagon? He says, when I come up to heaven, and they're going to be counting my mitzvahs and aveira, suddenly a horse is going to come running into Bezdin Shalmaila. And it's going to say, I get part of the schar because I took him to the Rebbe. He says the truth is that I could win the debate with the horse. I don't want to have to do with that. I don't want to have to do with horses. But we're going a little on the side. So Reb Shmuel Munkes, he was once walking to the Rebbe, and it was bitter cold, as it gets bitter cold in Russia. The kind of bitter cold that maybe today we were hoping for. And what comes by? Comes by a wagon. And the wagon driver sees a Yid walking on the side of the street and says, Reb Yid, where are you going? There. Let me give you a ride. I'm going in the same direction. Climb in the back of the wagon because there wasn't space. No, it wasn't nice and warm. But and the front of the wagon it was warm. What do you think? They had a fire over there?
Well, they have the cold box.
It wasn't warm. He went in the back of the wagon. It was actually, this was a whiskey merchant. So the back was filled with barrels and kegs of whiskey. But he was sitting there shivering. I mean, it's better than trudging in the snow. But in a way, actually, at least when you're walking, at least you have some body heat heating you up. And he was getting very cold. And finally, after a little while, so he knocked on the front and asked the person, can I take a cup? Can I take a little cup of mashka, a little cup of whiskey? I said, sure. Take what you want. So he took a little cup and he filled it up. He drank it. And suddenly he was warm. When he came to the Rebbe, he was talking to Chassidim. He says, I learned an amazing lesson. He says, there I was, surrounded by bottles of whiskey, and I was freezing. Even though I was surrounded by many barrels. But when I took one cup, but when it went inside me, suddenly I became warm. That's das. It's not how much Torah you know. It's how much Torah you connected with. There's a story from the Alter Rebbe which is hard to translate because it only goes in Yiddish. It's hard to translate it. That a chassid came to the Alter Rebbe. I don't know. So someone came to the Alter Rebbe, came into Yichidus, and he was busy telling the Alter Rebbe how much Torah he had learned. Yeah, apparently he had learned a lot. Shas in those days, Shas probably didn't impress too many people. Maybe Shas Bavli, Shas Yerushalmi, Poskim. Alter Rebbe listened patiently, and when he finished, Alter Rebbe says, "You're telling me all about Vifel Torah du hast gelernt, aber Vifel hat Torah dir ois gelernt." It's hard to translate. It's in Yiddish. You're telling me about how much Torah you learned, but how much did Torah teach you? Sorry. The shas you can learn. You can learn shas, but how much the shas dear is can learn? How much it teach you? And that's das. It's das. It's about connecting to that which you learned, and the capacity to connect. That's something that we get from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu gives us the ability to be able to connect to Hashem, connect to everything that we know about Hashem, our emunah on Hashem, and also to those things that we're getting from the other, from Avram and Yitzchak. That all comes from Moshe Rabbeinu. And as we see, as we'll see as we go along, once a person has das, then Yiras Hashem is not a big deal. Think about that. Why is it that we don't have Yiras Hashem? Okay, I don't want to talk for everyone over here. Why is it that people have a lack in Yiras Hashem? What do you mean? If I'm to tell you the Eivir Hashem Nitzav Allah, Hashem is standing over you, right? And Hashem, and He's watching you, and you're doing an Avir, He's watching you. How can you do an Avir? So what are you going to answer me? You don't know that Hashem is there? Of course you know Hashem is there. Is Hashem standing next to you and watching you? Is He all powerful? How's it possible to do an Avir? Sorry? Cognitive dissonance. Das eliminates cognitive dissonance. At the end of the day, das means that it becomes connected with you and becomes your reality. That's what's missing. And Moshe Rabbeinu is what gives us, is the one who gives us das. Let's do this inside a little. The Hainum, halfway down from the top of the page, the first word in the line is who. The Hainu Shemamshich Bechinas Adas. Moshe is the one who draws down das. L'klalos Yisrael, to all of Yidden. Leidas Hashem, the ability to know Hashem, to connect to Hashem. Kol Echad, everyone. Kifi Hasagas Nishmasei, to the ability that his neshama can grasp. So Moshe gives das to every neshama to the extent that the neshama is able to grasp. V'shar shalamayla, which is commensurate to the source of the neshama, the level of the source of the neshama lamayla. And v'nikasa misheresh nishmas Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom. And the das that we have also is connected to how much we are drawing from the neshama of Moshe. Hamushreshes bedas ha'elyon. Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is mushrish, is rooted in the supernal das, Hashem's das, shebeyut sfiris datzilus. Hashem's das, which is among the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Ham yichades b'matzilon baruchu. This is the spheres of Atzilus are united with Hashem. So Hashem's das is also united with Him, and that's what the Rambam says. Shuhu v'daitei echad. We know Hashem is one with His das. With His das, Hashem is His own knowledge. So Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is rooted in Hashem's das, which is connected with Hashem, and we draw. Every one of us draws from Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama. And ultimately, all the problems come from not having das. That's where Galus begins. Galus we're talking about on the national level, and Galus also on the individual level. That what keeps us in Galus is the lack of das. As we will continue, Mirz Hashem, talking next week more about the das and how the process of how we get das. And next week also we'll talk, Mirz Hashem, about the function of a tzaddik, the function of a rebbe, and also in giving everyone in their generation das. Good Shabbos, everyone.